The plasma bolt screamed through the air with a sound like tearing metal. Marcus Chen didn't think. He moved. His body slammed into the small figure beside him, sending Princess Zara tumbling behind the crystal outcropping just as the superheated energy tore through his shoulder. The smell of burned flesh and melted armor filled his nostrils as he hit the ground hard, his rifle clattering away across the rocky surface of Kepler 442b. "Stay down," he whispered through gritted teeth, his voice barely audible over the chaos erupting around their position. The 7-year-old Altarian princess pressed herself against the translucent rock formation, her large violet eyes wide with terror. Her golden skin had turned pale, and the delicate crystalline formations that grew from her temples, marking her royal bloodline, flickered with nervous bioluminescence. Marcus had been assigned to this diplomatic escort mission 3 months ago. What should have been a routine cultural exchange between the human colonial federation and the Altarian Empire had turned into a nightmare when separatist forces ambushed their convoy in the Crystal Canyons. Now, with most of the diplomatic party dead or scattered, he found himself the sole protector of the most important child in 2 star systems. The separatists, a radical faction of humans who rejected any alliance with alien species, had been tracking the diplomatic mission for weeks. Their leader, Colonel Victor Reeves, had made his intentions clear in the intercepted communications: kill the princess, blame it on bandits, and destroy any chance of the human-Altarian alliance. Marcus had read the intelligence reports. He knew what these fanatics were capable of. Another plasma bolt sizzled overhead, and Marcus could hear the heavy footsteps of combat boots approaching their position. He pressed his hand against his wounded shoulder, feeling the warm blood seeping through his fingers. The pain was manageable. He'd been hurt worse during the Proxima Centauri campaign, but the injury would slow him down. That was a problem when protecting someone as valuable as Princess Zara. "Are you hurt, Guardian Marcus?" the princess whispered, her voice carrying the musical quality that all Altarians possessed. Despite her terror, she was trying to be brave. Marcus had spent enough time with her over the past 3 months to recognize the signs: the way she straightened her small shoulders, how her chin lifted slightly despite the trembling in her voice. "I'm fine, Your Highness," he lied smoothly. His enhanced combat implants were already flooding his system with stimulants and painkillers, but even military-grade biomedical technology had its limits. "We just need to stay quiet until—" The sound of approaching voices cut him off. 3 separatists were moving through the crystal formations, their weapons sweeping methodically across potential hiding spots. Marcus could hear their leader, a sergeant by the sound of his voice, directing the search. "The princess is here somewhere," the sergeant was saying. "Reeves wants her alive for the broadcast, but if we can't take her, well, dead works just as well for our purposes." Marcus closed his eyes and accessed his tactical display through his neural interface. The overlay showed 3 hostile contacts approaching from the north, 2 more circling around from the east. His own position was marked in red, compromised, and vulnerable. The nearest friendly forces were 40 kilometers away, and their communications array had been destroyed in the initial ambush. He looked down at Princess Zara, who was watching him with those impossibly large eyes. In the 3 months since he'd been assigned as her guardian, she'd become more than just a mission objective. She was curious about human culture, asked endless questions about Earth, and had somehow convinced him to teach her how to play chess. She'd beaten him twice. "Guardian Marcus," she whispered, "my mother will come for me, won't she?" Empress Lyrale of Altair VII was indeed coming. Marcus knew that the moment the diplomatic convoy had been attacked, the most powerful ruler in this sector of the galaxy would have mobilized every ship at her disposal. But space was vast, and even the fastest Altarian vessels would take time to reach Kepler 442b. Time they might not have. "Yes," he said simply, "she will." The footsteps were getting closer. Marcus could see the barrel of a plasma rifle poking around the edge of their hiding spot. He had perhaps 30 seconds before they were discovered. His own sidearm was still holstered, but drawing it would require movement that might give away their position. More importantly, he was outnumbered 5 to 1, wounded, and responsible for protecting a child who couldn't defend herself. This was exactly the kind of impossible situation that had made humanity's reputation in the galaxy. When faced with overwhelming odds, when logic dictated surrender or retreat, humans had a disturbing tendency to do something completely unexpected. Marcus had read the historical accounts: the last stand of the 300 Spartans, the charge of the Light Brigade, the defense of Earth during the First Centauri War. Humans had a gift for finding ways to win when winning should have been impossible. "Your Highness," he whispered, his voice so quiet that even his enhanced hearing could barely pick it up. "When I move, you run toward the deeper part of the canyon. There's a cave system about 200 meters south. Hide there and don't come out until you hear your mother's voice. Do you understand?" Princess Zara nodded, her crystalline temples pulsing with a soft blue light that indicated fear among her species. "But what about you?" Marcus checked his sidearm, and the 3 fragmentation grenades clipped to his belt. Against 5 trained soldiers with military-grade weapons, it wasn't much. But humans had never been known for backing down from a fight, no matter how hopeless it seemed. "I'll be right behind you," he said, knowing it was probably a lie. The sergeant's voice was getting closer. "Check behind those crystal formations. If they're here, we'll flush them out." Marcus could see the shadow of the lead soldier approaching their hiding spot. In another few seconds, they would be spotted. He had to move now while surprise was still possible. He might not be able to save himself, but he could buy Princess Zara enough time to escape. That was what Guardians did. They protected those who couldn't protect themselves, no matter the cost. He rose to his feet in one fluid motion, his sidearm clearing its holster with the speed that had made him one of the Colonial Federation's elite soldiers. The first Separatist soldier rounded the corner just as Marcus opened fire. The plasma bolt took the man's center mass, his armor cracking like an eggshell under the superheated energy. "Run!" Marcus shouted to the princess as he dove for cover behind another crystal formation. Plasma bolts erupted around him, turning the beautiful crystalline structures into clouds of superheated vapor. He could hear Princess Zara's footsteps as she fled toward the canyon depths, her small form disappearing into the maze of rock and crystal. The remaining 4 soldiers immediately converged on his position. Marcus had perhaps 2 minutes before they flanked him completely. He armed one of his grenades and hurled it toward the largest concentration of enemy contacts. The explosion sent crystal shards flying like deadly rain, and he heard at least one scream of pain. But even as he fought, Marcus knew the mathematics of the situation. He was wounded, outnumbered, and running low on ammunition. The Separatists had backup coming, and his position was indefensible. This was going to be his last stand, just like those legendary human battles he'd studied in military academy. The thought should have terrified him, but instead, Marcus felt a strange sense of calm settle over his mind. This was what he had trained for his entire adult life, the moment when everything depended on his willingness to sacrifice himself for something greater. Princess Zara represented the future of human-alien cooperation, the possibility of a galaxy where different species could work together instead of destroying each other. That future was worth dying for. He popped up from cover and fired 3 quick shots, forcing the Separatists to duck behind their own protective positions. In the brief respite, he could see one of them speaking into a communication device, calling for reinforcements, no doubt. The window for Princess Zara's escape was closing rapidly. Marcus made his decision. Instead of continuing the defensive fight that would inevitably end in his death and the princess's capture, he would do what humans did best, something completely insane that just might work. He armed his remaining 2 grenades, holding one in each hand. Then he stood up and began walking directly toward the enemy positions, his sidearm firing steadily as he advanced. The Separatists, caught off guard by this suicidal charge, fell back in confusion. It was exactly the kind of tactical insanity that had given humanity its reputation as the most unpredictable species in the galaxy. "For the Federation," he roared, his voice echoing off the crystal canyon walls as plasma bolts seared the air around him. One caught him in the leg, sending him stumbling but not stopping his advance. Another grazed his helmet, cracking the visor and filling his vision with static from his damaged tactical display. But he kept moving forward, kept firing, kept being the unstoppable force that humanity had always been when their backs were against the wall. Behind him, hopefully hidden in the cave systems of the canyon, Princess Zara would survive. The alliance between their species would continue. And somewhere in the depths of space, Empress Lyrale was coming with enough firepower to turn this entire planet into glass. Marcus smiled grimly as he pulled the pins from both grenades. Sometimes, the best way to win was to make sure the enemy couldn't win either. It was a very human way of thinking, and in a few seconds, These separatist bastards were going to learn exactly why humans had earned their fearsome reputation across the galaxy. The grenades left his hands just as the concentrated plasma fire finally brought him down. As consciousness faded, his last thought was of a 7-year-old girl with violet eyes and a smile that could light up a room. He had done his duty. He had been humanity's guardian, its protector, its shield against those who would destroy the future. Princess Zara was safe. That was all that mattered. The explosions that followed could be heard for kilometers across the crystal canyons of Kepler 442b, announcing to anyone listening that a human soldier had made his final stand. In the caves where she hid, a small Altarian princess wept for the guardian who had saved her life. While high above the planet's atmosphere, the most powerful fleet in 2 star systems was arriving to rain down vengeance on those who had dared to threaten her child. The Separatists had succeeded in killing Marcus Chen, but they had made a critical error in their calculations. They had forgotten that humans never fought alone. They fought as part of something larger, something that would never stop coming for those who harmed the innocent. And Empress Lyrale of Altair VII was about to remind them of that fact in the most devastating way possible. The Imperial Dreadnought Starfare's wrath dropped out of hyperspace like an avenging angel, its massive bulk blotting out the stars above Kepler 442b. Behind it, the entire 7th Fleet of the Altarian Imperial Navy materialized in perfect formation, 63 warships ranging from nimble destroyers to massive carriers, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive silver-blue alloy that had made Altarian shipbuilding legendary across the galaxy. On the bridge of the flagship, Empress Lyrale stood motionless before the main view screen, her hands clasped behind her back as she stared down at the planet where her daughter was trapped. She was tall even for an Altarian, nearly 7 feet in height, with the regal bearing that had made her one of the most respected rulers in known space. The crystalline formations that marked her royal bloodline grew in elaborate patterns across her temples and forehead, pulsing with a deep red light that indicated barely controlled fury. "Your Majesty," Admiral Jorak said quietly, approaching from his position at the tactical station. "Long-range sensors have detected the remains of the diplomatic convoy in the Kepler Canyon system. There are survivors, but the area is heavily contested." Lyrale's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. For 3 days, she had been traveling through hyperspace, knowing only that her daughter's convoy had been attacked by human separatists. 3 days of not knowing whether Zara was alive or dead, 3 days of imagining the worst while maintaining the composed facade expected of an empress. Now, finally, she would have answers. "Show me," she commanded. The main view screen shifted to display a tactical overview of the planet's surface. The Kepler Canyon system was a maze of crystalline formations that stretched for hundreds of kilometers, beautiful but treacherous terrain that provided countless hiding places for both hunters and prey. Red markers indicated the locations of confirmed separatist forces, while blue markers showed the scattered survivors from the diplomatic mission. "The attack was well coordinated," Admiral Jorak continued, his own crystalline formations flickering with the orange light that indicated professional concern. "Intelligence suggests this was planned by Colonel Victor Reeves and his 4th Human Liberation Front. They've been operating in this sector for months, targeting any cooperation between our species and theirs." Lyrale studied the display with the cold calculation that had made her both an effective ruler and a feared military strategist. She could see the tactical situation clearly. Her daughter's convoy had been ambushed in the narrow canyon passes where their superior technology couldn't be brought to bear effectively. It was clever, she admitted grudgingly. Desperate and evil, but clever. "Where is Princess Zara?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Unknown, Your Majesty. The last confirmed sighting was 6 hours ago, when Guardian Marcus Chen was recorded engaging hostile forces near grid reference 7 Alpha. Since then?" Admiral Jorak paused, clearly reluctant to continue. "Since then?" Lyrale's voice carried the edge that had made diplomatic envoys across the galaxy choose their words very carefully. "Since then, there has been no communication from either the Guardian or the Princess. The Separatists are conducting an active search of the Canyon system, which suggests they have not yet located her. However, Guardian Chen's biosigns went dark approximately 30 minutes after the last sighting." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Everyone present understood what those words meant. Marcus Chen, the human soldier who had been personally selected by Lyrale to protect her daughter, was almost certainly dead. And if he was dead, then Zara was alone on a hostile planet with enemy forces closing in around her. Lyreley had met Guardian Chen only once, during the formal ceremony where he had sworn his oath of protection. She remembered being impressed by his quiet competence and the way he had looked directly into her eyes when making his vow, unusual for a human, who typically found direct eye contact with Altarian nobility intimidating. There had been something in his expression that convinced her he would indeed die before allowing harm to come to her daughter. It appeared he had kept that promise. "Admiral," she said quietly, "prepare a full planetary assault. I want every separatist on that planet dead within the hour." "Your Majesty," Admiral Jorak responded carefully, "a full assault might endanger the princess if she is still alive. The canyon system is geologically unstable. Sustained bombardment could trigger massive crystalline collapses that would bury everything for kilometers." Lyreley closed her eyes and forced herself to think like an empress rather than a terrified mother. Jorak was right, of course. Her first instinct was to reduce the entire planet to molten slag, to make the separatists pay for daring to threaten her child. But Zara might still be alive, might still be hiding somewhere in those crystal canyons. A massive bombardment would likely kill her own daughter along with her enemies. "Then we do this the hard way," she decided. "Launch every fighter we have, establish air superiority, and begin hunting the separatists squadron by squadron. Deploy the 4th and 7th Marine Regiments for ground operations. I want search and rescue teams in those canyons within 20 minutes." The bridge erupted into controlled activity as her orders were relayed throughout the fleet. Within minutes, the launch bays of a dozen carriers were disgorging fighters, sleek Altarian craft that moved through atmosphere like silver arrows. The Marines would follow in their assault shuttles, bringing the kind of close-quarters combat expertise that would be needed in the crystal maze below. But even as she watched her forces deploy, Lyreley felt a cold weight in her chest. Military operations took time, and time was the one thing she might not have. If the separatists found Zara before her own forces could reach her, all the firepower in the galaxy wouldn't bring her daughter back. "Your Majesty," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's on an emergency frequency." Lyreley spun toward the communications station. "From Princess Zara." "No, Your Majesty. It's from Colonel Victor Reeves himself." The main view screen shifted to show the face of a middle-aged human man with graying hair and cold blue eyes. His uniform bore the insignia of the Colonial Federation, though Lyreley knew he had been stripped of his rank years ago, when his extremist views had finally become too much for even the human military to tolerate. "Empress Lyreley," Reeves said, his voice carrying the kind of calm confidence that suggested he held all the cards in this particular game. "How nice of you to join us. I trust you received my message about your daughter's situation." "If you have harmed her," Lyreley began, but Reeves cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Oh, I haven't harmed her, yet, but I'm afraid that the brave Guardian Chen was not quite as indestructible as human propaganda would have you believe. He gave us quite a fight, I'll give him that. Very dramatic, very human. But in the end, he died just like any other mortal being when faced with superior firepower." Lyreley's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Through the centuries of her reign, she had learned to control her emotions, to present the composed facade that diplomacy required. But hearing this human scum casually discuss the death of the man who had died protecting her daughter was testing the limits of that control. "What do you want?" she asked. "Simple," Reeves replied. "I want you to withdraw your fleet and return to Altarian space. In return, I will allow your daughter to live. Refuse, and she dies. Attack our positions, and she dies. Try any clever rescue operations, and she dies. The choice is yours, Empress." "And what guarantee do I have that you will honor such an agreement?" Reeves smiled, and Lyreley found herself understanding why humans had developed such a reputation for cold-blooded ruthlessness. "You have the word of a human officer. I know that may not mean much to your species, but it's all I'm prepared to offer." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Lyreley stared at the now blank view screen, her mind racing through possibilities and probabilities. Reeves was clearly hopping to use Zara as a bargaining chip, either to secure safe passage for his forces or to strike a blow against human-Altarian cooperation. But he had made a critical error in his calculations. He had assumed that Lyreley would be willing to negotiate, with the people who had killed her daughter's protector. "Admiral Jorak," she said quietly, "how long until our ground forces reach the canyon system?" 15 minutes for the first wave, Your Majesty. Full deployment will take 40 minutes. And our intelligence on separatist positions? Limited, but our fighters are conducting reconnaissance sweeps. We should have better information within 10 minutes. Lyrale nodded slowly, then activated her personal communication system. "This is Empress Lyrale to all Altarian forces. You are authorized to use any means necessary to locate and rescue Princess Zara. As for the separatist forces," she paused, considering her words carefully. "As for the separatist forces, they have killed a guest under our protection, threatened a member of the imperial family, and violated every law of civilized warfare. They are to be shown the same mercy they showed Guardian Chen." The implications of that order rippled through the fleet. In Altarian military tradition, there were few crimes worse than killing a sworn protector. Marcus Chen had died fulfilling his oath, and that made him a brother-in-arms to every Altarian warrior. The Separatists had just made this conflict very personal for 63 warships worth of highly trained, extremely angry alien soldiers. "Your Majesty," Admiral Jorak said carefully, "Colonel Reeves may carry out his threat if we proceed with the assault." Lyrale turned to face her admiral, and for a moment the composure slipped to reveal the fury beneath. Her crystalline formations were pulsing with deep crimson light, and her eyes held the kind of cold fire that had made her ancestors conquerors of star systems. "Admiral, my daughter has been hiding alone in those canyons for 6 hours, knowing that her protector is dead and that enemies are hunting her. If she is still alive, it is because Guardian Chen taught her well and because she has the courage of her bloodline. She is not the helpless victim that Colonel Reeves believes her to be." She moved to the tactical display, studying the canyon system with the eye of a military strategist who had fought campaigns across dozens of worlds. "More importantly, Colonel Reeves has made the same mistake that humans always make when dealing with other species. He assumes we think like he does, that we are willing to abandon our principles when threatened. He does not understand that some things are worth more than individual lives." "Your Majesty, my daughter is the heir to the Altarian throne, but she is not more important than the alliance between our peoples. Guardian Chen died protecting not just Zara, but everything our two species have built together. If I allow his sacrifice to be meaningless, if I retreat and let these terrorists achieve their goals, then his death was for nothing." Lyrale straightened to her full height, every inch the Empress who had unified dozens of worlds under the Altarian banner. "Begin the assault, Admiral. Find my daughter, bring her home safely, and show these separatists what happens when they threaten the innocent." As the first wave of Altarian fighters screamed down through the planet's atmosphere, their weapons charging for the battle to come, Lyrale allowed herself one moment of purely maternal fear. Somewhere below, in the crystal canyons of Kepler 442b, a 7-year-old girl was hiding from enemies who wanted her dead, and the only person who could have protected her had already given his life to keep her safe. But humans had chosen the wrong enemy this time. They had attacked the daughter of an empress, killed a sworn guardian, and declared war on the future itself. And now they were about to learn why the Altarian Empire had never lost a war in 300 years of interstellar conflict. The hunt for Princess Zara was about to begin, and when it was over, the galaxy would remember why threatening the innocent was always a fatal mistake. Princess Zara pressed herself deeper into the crystal cave that Guardian Marcus had told her to find, her small body trembling as the sound of plasma fire echoed through the canyon above. The cave was beautiful in the way that everything on Kepler 442b was beautiful, walls of translucent crystal that caught and refracted light in impossible patterns, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that should have been magical. Instead, it felt like a tomb. She had been hiding for what felt like forever, though her internal chronometer told her it had only been 6 hours since she had heard the explosions that marked Guardian Marcus's last stand. 6 hours of absolute silence, of jumping at every sound, of trying not to cry because crying made noise and noise would bring the bad humans who wanted to hurt her. The princess understood more about her situation than most 7-year-old children would. She had been raised to inherit an empire, educated in politics and military strategy from the moment she could walk. She knew that the humans who had attacked their convoy were not like Guardian Marcus. They hated her people and wanted to destroy the friendship between their species. She knew that if they found her, they would probably kill her. but knowing something and truly understanding it were different things, and the reality of being alone on a hostile planet was beginning to overwhelm even her royal training. She missed her mother's warm embrace, missed the safety of the palace on Altair VII, missed Guardian Marcus's quiet presence, and the way he always seemed to know exactly what to do. Guardian Marcus was dead. She had seen the explosions, had felt the ground shake beneath her feet as he made his final stand. The humans had killed him, and now she was alone. A new sound drifted down from above, different from the plasma fire she had been hearing intermittently throughout the day. This was the scream of atmospheric engines, multiple contacts moving fast. Zara crept toward the cave entrance and peered upward through the crystal formations. In the distance, she could see silver shapes streaking across the sky, their forms unmistakably Altarian. Her mother had come. The thought sent a surge of hope through her small body, followed immediately by fear. If her mother was here, then there would be fighting, lots of fighting, and Zara was trapped in the middle of it. She activated her personal communicator, the small device that Guardian Marcus had given her during their first week together. "This is Princess Zara," she whispered into the device. "I am hiding in a cave in the southern part of the canyon. Guardian Marcus told me to stay here until I heard my mother's voice." Static answered her, followed by the electronic whine of signal interference. The bad humans were jamming communications, just like Guardian Marcus had taught her they might do. She was still alone. Above her, the battle was intensifying. She could hear the distinctive whine of Altarian plasma cannons mixed with the deeper roar of human weapons. Occasionally, pieces of debris would rain down from above, fragments of crystal blown loose by explosions, sometimes bits of metal that glowed with residual heat. Zara retreated deeper into the cave and tried to remember everything that Guardian Marcus had taught her about survival situations. Stay hidden, stay quiet, conserve food and water, don't move unless absolutely necessary, trust in rescue forces but be prepared to survive on your own. She had a small emergency kit that contained nutrition bars and water purification tablets, enough to last perhaps 3 days if she was careful. Her royal robes were designed with environmental protection in mind, keeping her warm despite the cool temperature of the cave. She could survive for a while, but eventually she would have to either be rescued or attempt to escape on her own. The thought of leaving the cave terrified her, but Guardian Marcus had also taught her about backup plans. If the primary rescue failed, if hiding was no longer safe, then she would have to move. He had shown her how to read the stars for navigation, how to find water sources, how to avoid detection by hostile forces. "A princess must be able to take care of herself," he had said during one of their training sessions. "Your people will depend on you someday. You cannot protect others if you cannot protect yourself." At the time, she had thought it was just another boring lesson. Now, she understood that he had been preparing her for exactly this situation. A new sound reached her ears, footsteps on crystal. Someone was climbing down into the canyon system, moving carefully but steadily toward her hiding place. Zara froze, barely breathing as she listened to the approaching contact. It could be rescue forces. It could also be the separatists who had been hunting her all day. "Princess Zara?" a voice called out, speaking in accented Altarian. "Princess, if you can hear me, this is Colonel Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Federation Marine Corps. I am Guardian Marcus's sister. He asked me to find you if something happened to him." Zara's heart leaped. Guardian Marcus had a sister. He had never mentioned family, had always seemed like a solitary figure dedicated entirely to his duty. But the voice was speaking the correct protocols, using the safety words that only Guardian Marcus and a few trusted individuals would know. Still, she hesitated. Guardian Marcus had warned her that enemies might try to trick her, might use false identities to lure her out of hiding. How could she be sure this was really his sister? "Princess," the voice continued, "Marcus told me to tell you about the chess game you won last week. He said you used the Sicilian defense and sacrificed your queen to achieve checkmate. He was very proud of that game." That decided it. Only Guardian Marcus could have known about that chess match. It had been private, just the two of them in her quarters aboard the diplomatic ship. She had been so excited about beating him that she had made him replay the game 3 times to show her exactly how she had won. Zara crept toward the cave entrance, peering out through the crystal formations. Below her, she could see a figure in Colonial Federation armor picking its way through the rocky terrain. The armor was different from the suits she had seen the separatists wearing, newer, better maintained, with the kind of advanced systems that only elite units possessed. "I'm here," she called out quietly. The figure looked up, and Zara could see a woman's face through the transparent aluminum visor. She had the same dark eyes as Guardian Marcus, the same determined expression that suggested she would never give up on a mission. "There you are," Colonel Chen said, relief evident in her voice. "Are you hurt, Princess?" "No," Zara replied, though she realized she was shaking. "Guardian Marcus saved me. He made the bad humans go away." Colonel Chen climbed up toward the cave entrance, moving with the same fluid grace that Guardian Marcus had possessed. "He did his job, Princess. Now I'm going to do mine and get you somewhere safe." As she got closer, Zara could see that Colonel Chen's armor bore scorch marks and impact craters, evidence of recent combat. There was dried blood on her gauntlets, and her left shoulder piece was partially melted. She had fought her way through enemy forces to reach this cave. "Where is my mother?" Zara asked as Colonel Chen reached the cave entrance. "Empress Lyrale is commanding the fleet in orbit," Colonel Chen replied, checking her weapons and scanning the surrounding area for threats. "She wanted to come down personally, but we convinced her that a planetary assault required proper coordination. Don't worry, she's very worried about you and very angry at the people who attacked your convoy." Zara felt another surge of relief. Her mother was safe, and from the sounds of combat echoing through the canyon, the bad humans were having a very bad day. But something else occurred to her, something that made her stomach twist with grief. "Guardian Marcus is really dead, isn't he?" Colonel Chen paused in her tactical assessment and looked directly at the princess. For a moment, her professional composure cracked, and Zara could see the raw pain in her eyes. "Yes, Princess, he is, but he completed his mission. He saved you, and he gave us the time we needed to mount a rescue operation." "He was a good guardian," Zara said quietly. "He was a good brother," Colonel Chen replied. "And he would want me to get you home safely. Are you ready to move?" Zara gathered her small emergency pack and prepared to leave the cave that had been her sanctuary. As they started their descent toward the canyon floor, she could hear the battle raging above them. Altarian fighters engaging separatist positions, Marines advancing through the crystal maze, the sounds of a war being fought to rescue one small girl. "Colonel Chen," she said as they moved carefully through the rocky terrain, "why did the bad humans attack us? Guardian Marcus explained about the Alliance, but I don't understand why they hate us so much." Colonel Chen was quiet for a moment, her attention split between answering the question and watching for hostile contacts. "Some humans are afraid of things that are different," she said finally. "They think that cooperation with other species will somehow make humanity weaker. They would rather fight alone than build something together." "But that's stupid," Zara said with the blunt honesty that only children possessed. "Together we're stronger. That's why Mother wanted the Alliance." "Yes, it is stupid," Colonel Chen agreed. "But fear makes people do stupid things. My brother understood that. He believed in the Alliance, believed in building a future where humans and Altarians could work together. That's why he was willing to die protecting you." They reached the bottom of the canyon and began moving toward an extraction point that Colonel Chen had identified on her tactical display. Above them, the battle was beginning to shift in favor of the Altarian forces. Zara could tell because the plasma fire was becoming more sporadic, and she could hear the distinctive whine of Altarian transport shuttles beginning their descent. "Princess," Colonel Chen said, activating her communication system, "I'm going to try to contact the extraction team. Stay close and be ready to run if I tell you to." She spoke quietly into her comm unit, using military codes that Zara didn't understand. After a few moments, she smiled for the first time since finding the princess. "Good news," she said. "There's an Altarian shuttle landing about 1/2 kilometer from here. They'll have you back to your mother within the hour." As they made their way through the crystal formations toward the extraction point, Zara found herself thinking about Guardian Marcus and the sacrifice he had made. He had known he was going to die. She could see it now, looking back at those final moments. He had known the mathematics of the situation, had understood that he couldn't win against so many enemies. But he had fought anyway, had died anyway, because protecting her was more important than his own survival. It was the most human thing she could imagine, and also the most heroic. Guardian Marcus had taught her that heroism wasn't about being fearless. It was about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. He had been terrified in those final moments, she was sure of it. but he had stood up and fought because that was what guardians did. When she became empress someday, she would remember this lesson. She would remember that strength came not from being unafraid, but from facing fear with courage. She would remember that some things were worth dying for, and some people were worth protecting no matter the cost. And she would remember Marcus Chen, the silent soldier who had taken a bullet for a little princess and saved the future of 2 species with his sacrifice. The Altarian shuttle's swift mercy settled onto the crystalline canyon floor with the whisper-quiet precision that made their anti-gravity technology the envy of the galaxy. Its silver hull gleamed in the pale light of Kepler 442b's twin suns, and as the landing ramp extended, Princess Zara could see the familiar uniforms of her mother's Imperial Guard waiting inside. Colonel Sarah Chen kept her weapon ready as they approached the shuttle, her tactical display showing green contacts, but her soldiers' instincts refusing to fully relax until the princess was safely aboard. The separatist forces were in full retreat now, but desperate enemies were often the most dangerous ones. "Your Highness," Captain Thane of the Imperial Guard said formally as they reached the ramp. His crystalline formations glowed with the deep blue light that indicated relief among his species. "Empress Lyrale is waiting for you aboard the flagship." Zara paused at the bottom of the ramp and turned back to Colonel Chen. The human marine was already preparing to return to the battle, checking her weapons and communication equipment with the methodical efficiency that marked professional soldiers everywhere. "Thank you for finding me," Zara said quietly. "Guardian Marcus would be proud of you." Colonel Chen knelt down so that she was at eye level with the princess. Up close, Zara could see that her eyes were red-rimmed with grief and exhaustion. "Princess, I need you to do something for me. When you see your mother, when you talk to the diplomats and the historians, I need you to remember exactly what happened here. My brother died protecting you, but more than that, he died protecting an idea. The idea that different species can work together, can trust each other, can build something better than either could achieve alone." "I will remember," Zara promised solemnly. "Good, because there will be people, humans and Altarians both, who will try to use this attack to argue against the Alliance. They'll say it proves that our species are too different, too violent, too untrustworthy. They'll want to use Marcus's death as evidence that cooperation is impossible." Colonel Chen stood up, her expression hardening with resolve. "Don't let them. Marcus believed in the Alliance. He died for it. Make sure his sacrifice means something." As the shuttle lifted off, carrying the princess towards safety and reunion with her mother, Colonel Chen watched until it disappeared into the vast blue sky above. Then she activated her communication system and contacted her commanding officer. "This is Marine 6, she reported. "Package is secure and en route to Mother 1, requesting assignment to mop up operations." The voice that replied carried the satisfaction of a mission accomplished. "Copy, Marine 6. Proceed to grid reference 12 Delta. We've got separatist leadership pinned down in a bunker complex. They've requested terms for surrender." "What terms are we offering?" Colonel Chen asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Same terms they offered Guardian Chen," came the cold reply. Colonel Chen smiled grimly and began making her way toward the specified coordinates. The Separatists had made a fundamental error in their understanding of both human and Altarian psychology. They had assumed that killing Marcus would demoralize their enemies, would demonstrate the futility of resistance. Instead, they had created a martyr whose death had unified 2 species in righteous fury. Above her, the sky was full of Altarian fighters conducting search and destroy missions, hunting down the remnants of Reeves's force with systematic efficiency. The Separatists had nowhere to run, their ships were destroyed, their communication networks compromised, their leadership structure in collapse. This was no longer a battle, it was a reckoning. Meanwhile, aboard the Starfare's Wrath, Princess Zara found herself swept into her mother's embrace before she had even finished crossing the threshold of the flagship's main hangar bay. Empress Lyrale held her daughter tightly, and for a moment, the composed ruler disappeared entirely, replaced by a mother who had nearly lost the most precious thing in her universe. "I was so frightened," Lyrale whispered, her crystalline formations pulsing with the golden light that indicated overwhelming relief. "When we received word of the attack, when Guardian Chen's biosigns went dark, I thought I had lost you." "Guardian Marcus saved me," Zara said, her voice slightly muffled against her mother's robes. He fought the bad humans so I could escape. He was very brave. Lyreley closed her eyes, feeling the weight of obligation settle on her shoulders. Marcus Chen had been her choice as protector for Zara, selected personally after reviewing hundreds of candidates. She had trusted him with her daughter's life, and he had proven worthy of that trust in the most ultimate way possible. "Tell me everything," she said gently. "I need to understand exactly what happened." As they made their way to the Empress's private quarters, Zara recounted the events of the attack and its aftermath. She spoke of Guardian Marcus's quick thinking during the ambush, his decision to sacrifice himself so she could escape, and the long hours of hiding until Colonel Chen had found her. Lyreley listened carefully, noting every detail for the reports that would have to be filed, the investigations that would have to be conducted, and the diplomatic protocols that would have to be observed. But beneath her political calculations, she was processing the emotional reality of what her daughter had experienced. A 7-year-old child had watched her protector die, had hidden alone on a hostile planet for hours, had faced the very real possibility of death at the hands of extremists. The psychological impact of such trauma would require careful attention and expert counseling. "Mother," Zara said as they settled into the comfortable chairs of the Imperial quarters, "why did Guardian Marcus choose to die for me? I understand duty and honor, but he had a sister who loved him. He could have run away with me instead of fighting." It was a remarkably sophisticated question for a child, but then again, Zara had been raised to think about complex issues. Lyreley considered her answer carefully, knowing that her words would help shape her daughter's understanding of sacrifice and leadership. "Because some things are more important than individual lives," she said finally. "Guardian Marcus understood that you represent more than just yourself. You are the future of the alliance between our peoples, the symbol of what we can achieve when we work together instead of fighting each other. If he had run away, the separatists might have caught both of you. By fighting, by buying you time to escape, he ensured that the future he believed in would survive." "But that seems so heavy," Zara said, "to carry the hopes of entire species." Lyreley reached out and took her daughter's small hand in her own. "It is heavy, my dear one. That is the burden of leadership, knowing that your choices affect not just yourself, but countless others. Guardian Marcus carried that burden willingly because he believed that the alliance between humans and Altarians was worth protecting. Someday, you will have to decide what you are willing to carry, what you are willing to sacrifice for." Through the viewports of the Imperial quarters, they could see the planet below as Altarian forces completed their systematic destruction of separatist positions. The crystal canyons were lit by the glow of plasma fire as the last pockets of resistance were eliminated. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, the sight of justice being dispensed with overwhelming force. "What will happen to Colonel Reeves?" Zara asked. "He will face trial for his crimes," Lyreley replied. "War crimes, terrorism, the murder of a diplomatic protector. If he survives the current operation, he will answer for what he has done." "And what about the Alliance? Will this attack change anything?" Lyreley was quiet for a moment, considering the political implications of the day's events. The separatist attack had been designed to destroy cooperation between their species, to prove that humans and Altarians could never truly trust each other. In one sense, it had failed completely. The response to the crisis had demonstrated the strength of their mutual commitment. Altarian forces had risked everything to rescue a human-protected Altarian princess, while human Marines like Colonel Chen had fought alongside alien soldiers to defeat a common enemy. But in another sense, the attack had succeeded in ways its perpetrators probably never intended. The death of Marcus Chen had created a powerful symbol of human-Altarian cooperation, a martyr whose sacrifice would be remembered for generations. His story would become part of the foundational mythology of the Alliance, proof that trust between species was not only possible, but worth dying for. "No," she said finally. "I think this attack will make the Alliance stronger. Guardian Marcus's sacrifice has shown both our peoples what we can achieve when we stand together. His death will not be meaningless if we build something lasting on the foundation he helped create." A soft chime indicated an incoming communication from Admiral Jorak. Lyreley activated the display, and her admiral's face appeared on the screen. "Your Majesty," he reported, "ground operations are complete. All separatist forces have been neutralized. Colonel Reeves was killed during the assault on his command bunker. He chose to fight rather than surrender. Any casualties among our forces?" Minimal, Your Majesty. The Separatists were well armed but poorly coordinated. Guardian Chen's initial resistance disrupted their plans significantly, and they never recovered their tactical initiative. Lyrelay nodded. Even in death, Marcus Chen had continued to serve the mission, his sacrifice buying time and creating confusion among the enemy forces. "Begin recovery operations for Guardian Chen's remains," she ordered. "He will receive full military honors, and his body will be returned to Earth for burial among heroes." "Already in progress, Your Majesty. We've also recovered the remains of the other diplomatic personnel. The full casualty list will be available within the hour." As the communication ended, Lyrelay turned back to her daughter. Zara was staring out at the planet below, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. The experience had changed her, that much was obvious. The carefree child who had left Altair VII 3 months ago was gone, replaced by someone who had seen the reality of sacrifice and loss. "Mother," Zara said quietly, "when I become Empress, I want to establish a memorial for Guardian Marcus. Something that reminds people of what he did, why he died. I want everyone to remember that humans and Altarians can be family, even when they're different species." "That is a worthy goal," Lyrelay agreed. "But remember that the best memorial for Guardian Marcus will be the Alliance itself. Every treaty signed, every friendship formed, every problem solved through cooperation instead of conflict. That will be his true monument." As the Starfare's Wrath prepared to depart Kepler 442b, carrying Princess Zara home to safety and leaving behind a planet that would forever be remembered as the site of Marcus Chen's last stand, both mother and daughter understood that this day had changed everything. The alliance between their species had been tested in the crucible of violence and betrayal, and it had emerged stronger than ever. The Separatists had failed in their fundamental objective. Instead of proving that cooperation was impossible, they had demonstrated its absolute necessity. Instead of driving humans and Altarians apart, they had forged them together in shared purpose. And instead of destroying the future, they had helped create a martyr whose sacrifice would inspire generations to come. Guardian Marcus Chen had taken a bullet for a little princess, and in doing so, he had saved the future of 2 civilizations. 10 years later, Empress Zara stood before the memorial of the Silent Soldiers on New Geneva, the first joint human-Altarian colony world. The monument was a masterpiece of cooperative engineering, crystalline formations grown by Altarian bioarchitects supporting a central spire of Earth titanium, reaching toward the sky like a frozen prayer. At its base, carved in both human script and Altarian energy writing, were the names of every being who had died protecting the alliance between their species. At the very center, highlighted in letters that seemed to glow with their own inner light, was one name: Marcus Chen, Guardian, Human Colonial Federation Marine Corps. The ceremony today marked the 10th anniversary of the Kepler incident, as historians had come to call it, and representatives from dozens of species had gathered to honor those who had died protecting the future. Zara had been Empress for 3 years now, having inherited the throne when her mother passed away in a transport accident. The burden of leadership that her mother had warned her about had settled on her shoulders earlier than expected, but the lessons learned in Crystal Canyons had prepared her for the weight of responsibility. "Your Majesty," Admiral Sarah Chen said, approaching from her position among the assembled dignitaries. She wore the uniform of the Allied Defense Force, the joint military organization that had grown out of the original Human-Altarian Alliance. Her rank insignia showed 4 stars, marking her as one of the most senior officers in the combined fleet. "Admiral Chen," Zara replied warmly, "thank you for coming. I know Marcus would be proud to see how far you've risen." Sarah smiled, though her eyes held the perpetual sadness that had marked her since her brother's death. "He always said the best memorial for the fallen was the success of those who survived. I think he'd be amazed to see what we've built together." They both looked out over the crowd assembled for the ceremony. Humans and Altarians stood side by side, their children playing together in the memorial gardens without any awareness of the barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. Representatives from the Centauri Federation, the Vegan Republic, and a dozen other species that had joined the Alliance in the decade since Kepler 442b added their own colors and forms to the gathering. The Alliance had grown far beyond its original boundaries. What had begun as a simple cooperation agreement between humans and Altarians had become a galactic confederation united around principles of mutual protection, shared knowledge, and peaceful exploration. The separatist movement that had killed Marcus Chen had succeeded only in demonstrating the power of unity over division. "Your Majesty," an aide approached with a communications tablet. "The Terran delegation has arrived. President Harrison sends his regards and asks when you would like to begin the formal ceremony." "Give us 5 more minutes," Zara replied. "I want to pay my respects privately first." She approached the central memorial, her own crystalline formations, now fully developed in the elaborate patterns that marked imperial maturity, glowing with soft blue light. At the base of the monument, someone had left fresh flowers from Earth alongside crystalline formations from Altair VII. The gesture of remembrance touched her deeply. "I kept my promise," she whispered to the memorial. "I remembered everything, just like Colonel Chen asked me to. I remembered why you died, what you believed in, what you were trying to protect. And I've spent 10 years making sure your sacrifice meant something." The alliance had not been without its challenges. There had been other separatist attacks, political crises that threatened to tear apart the cooperation between species, and moments when the dream of unity had seemed fragile as spun glass. But each time, the memory of Marcus Chen and others like him had provided the moral foundation needed to preserve what they had built together. "Your Majesty," Admiral Chen said quietly, "it's time." Zara nodded and walked to the speaker's platform that had been erected facing the memorial. The crowd quieted as she took her position, thousands of beings from dozens of worlds giving her their attention. In the front rows, she could see the families of other Guardians who had died protecting the Alliance, humans who had died for alien dignitaries, Altarians who had sacrificed themselves for human colonies, Centaurians who had given their lives defending trade routes between species. "My friends," she began, her voice carrying easily across the assembled crowd thanks to the translation technology that was another fruit of interspecies cooperation. "We gather today not to mourn the dead, but to celebrate the living. We celebrate the future that their sacrifices made possible." She gestured toward the memorial behind her. Guardian Marcus Chen died protecting a 7-year-old girl who was, at that moment, nothing more than a frightened child hiding in a cave. He could not have known that this child would grow up to lead an empire, could not have predicted the political changes that would follow from his sacrifice. He acted not because he knew the outcome, but because he knew the principle, that protecting the innocent was worth any price. The crowd listened in respectful silence as she continued. "That principle has become the foundation of everything we have built together. Not the pursuit of profit, not the expansion of territory, not the domination of one species over another, but the simple idea that we are stronger when we protect each other than when we fight alone." In the crowd, she could see Colonel Chen's daughter, now a lieutenant in the Allied Defense Force, standing next to an Altarian officer who had become her close friend during their shared service. The sight filled Zara with hope for the future. The next generation was growing up in a galaxy where cooperation between species was not revolutionary but normal, where the idea of dying for someone of another race was not heroic but simply human, or Altarian, or Centaurian, or vegan. "There are those who would say that Guardian Chen died for nothing," Zara said, her voice growing stronger. "They point to the continuing conflicts in the galaxy, to the species that still refuse to join our alliance, to the pirates and terrorists and extremists who continue to spread violence and hatred. They ask how one man's death could possibly matter in the face of such vast problems." She paused, looking out over the assembled crowd. "But they are wrong. Guardian Chen did not die to solve every problem in the galaxy. He died to prove that problems could be solved, that different species could trust each other enough to risk everything for cooperation. His death was not the end of conflict, it was the beginning of hope." The formal ceremony continued for another hour, with speeches from various dignitaries and the presentation of awards to those who had continued Marcus Chen's work of building bridges between species. But for Zara, the most meaningful moment came at the end, when a group of children from the colony's integrated school approached the memorial with their own flowers and handmade tributes. These children, human and Altarian and half a dozen other species, had grown up together, had learned together, had formed friendships that transcended the biological differences that had once seemed so important. They approached the memorial with the natural reverence that children showed for stories of heroism, but without the surprise that previous generations might have felt at the idea of cross-species sacrifice. To them, it was simply natural that a human would die protecting an Altarian child. That was what family did for each other, and these species were family now in every way that mattered. As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Zara found herself once again standing alone before the memorial. Admiral Chen approached and stood beside her, both women lost in their own thoughts and memories. "Do you think you would be proud of what we've accomplished?" Admiral Chen asked. Zara considered the question carefully. The galaxy was still not perfect. There were still conflicts, still species that remained isolated or hostile, still individuals who chose fear over cooperation. But there were also wonders that had been unimaginable 10 years ago. Joint research stations where human creativity combined with Altarian precision to push the boundaries of science, trade routes that brought prosperity to dozens of worlds, and most importantly, a generation of children who saw diversity as strength rather than threat. "I think he would be proud," she said finally. "But I also think he would remind us that the work is not finished. There are still species out there who need what we can offer, still conflicts that need peacemakers, still children who need protectors." "Then we keep building," Admiral Chen said simply. "We keep proving that his sacrifice was worthwhile." As they walked away from the memorial together, an Altarian empress and a human admiral, allies and friends bound together by shared loss and shared hope, the setting sun caught the crystalline formations at the top of the monument. For just a moment, the entire structure seemed to glow with inner light, as if the spirit of everyone commemorated there was blessing the future they had died to create. In the distance, a new ship was arriving at the orbital station. Representatives from the Andorian collective, finally ready to discuss joining the alliance after years of isolation. There would be negotiations, cultural exchanges, the slow work of building trust between species that had never worked together before. It was exactly the kind of work that Marcus Chen would have supported, the kind of future he had envisioned when he chose to stand and fight instead of running. His sacrifice had planted a seed in the crystal canyons of Kepler 442b, and that seed had grown into something beautiful and strong and enduring. The silent soldier had taken a bullet for a little princess, and minutes later, her mother had arrived to begin the work of building a better galaxy. 10 years after that, the little princess had become an empress, and the work continued. It would continue for generations to come, each one building on the foundation that had been laid with blood and courage in a place far from home. Some battles ended with victory parades and conquered territories. Marcus Chen's battle had ended with something far more valuable, hope for a future where different species could stand together against the darkness, where protecting the innocent was not just a duty but a calling, where the phrase, "all beings are created equal," was not just words but the fundamental law of civilized space. The memorial would stand for centuries, reminding future generations of the price of peace and the power of sacrifice. But the true monument to Marcus Chen was not made of crystal and metal. It was made of lives saved, friendships forged, and children who would grow up in a galaxy where cooperation was stronger than conflict. The silent soldier's watch was over. His duty was complete, and the future he had died to protect stretched out before them, bright with infinite possibility.